burner as far as that goes. Like, I'm still helping, but I'm not doing anything specific. So, let's see. That was month 4. About month 5, I start talking to a girl. Somewhat interested in her. We're getting close to dating, and I tell her about where I went to church. And she tells me a story about the pastor of this church. And this is kind of where I start to realize that something's up. I thought it was odd that they would bring somebody in out of the blue, but I didn't think it was like devious at all. But she had a friend that went to this church before I did, about a year before I did. And this friend is married, and they were going to the pastor of this church for counseling. And during these counseling sessions, the pastor ends up seducing the wife of the couple, and they end up sleeping together a couple times. And it led to a huge blowout in the church. Before I was there, the pastor left and left the other pastor in charge. And this was all before I came in, and there was no indications that this was the case. So this is all like a backhanded story. And so I did my due diligence of trying to find all the information and everything. And this is kind of when I think they caught wind, because I was asking a lot of the people that had been there for a long time, what's going on? What is this whole story? And they started telling me stuff. And I think the pastor and the other guy that he had basically put as the second in command, kind of caught wind that I was asking these questions, and they pull me into this like basement room, right? Because that's what they had available to them. Pull me into this basement room on a random ass day, and they're telling me basically, like, you need to decide whether you like this, whether you're gonna stay here and support the pastor no matter what, regardless of what the past says. You need to decide now, and basically trying to silence me, right? Like trying to say you need to decide now if you're going to continue to spread what they called rumors, or if you're going to stay at the church. So at this time,
this was the same church that you've been at for 5 months, right?
This is about 6 months now. Yeah.
6 months. And this was the same church that you were at?
Yep. Same church.
Okay. All right.
Yep. And so I actually leave the church to date this girl that I was talking to. But I'm still going to the initial group. Now, this is only half the story, because I'll get back to this, because I go back to the church after a while. So I decide to leave based on those reasons. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it wasn't those things that really stopped me. It was more the fact that this girl wasn't going to date me if I continued to go, if I'm being perfectly honest.
Right.
So I stayed at the group that had got me started at the church in general. So in a span of about 8 months between, I only ended up dating her for like 3 months. It did not work out well at all, but I'm still going to this group. And during this 8-month stretch, the group becomes officially a part of the church. So as before, it was somewhat connected, but it wasn't like run by the church. The church didn't decide what the lessons were. The lessons were all independent. It was an independent group of people. At that point, they decide to become a part of that church. The group was about 4 years older than the church was, just to give like a little bit of perspective. So towards the end of these 8-month stretch I had between when I was going, my best friend starts dating one of the girls that goes to that church, and he asked me to join him to just kind of have somebody comfortable to go with him with his first day there, because he started dating this girl. She wanted him to come with him. I think her family really wanted him to come more than anything, but I decided to go with him. So I am back in the church that I left 8 months ago, and I hadn't really told anything about, like, I didn't really like blasphemed anybody or, talk bad against them or anything. I pretty much just stayed quiet. So I went back, and I was pretty well accepted, but really that first day back, I had no intentions on staying, but I did. I kept going back for some reason. And as I kept going back, I got back into the teams that I was a part of. So I'm consistently going back for about 2 more months. I decided to sign. They have this contract of commitment to faith, I think is what they call it. And this really isn't that uncommon among churches. But this one was like, you're basically committing to a counterculture, which is a very strange thing for a church to do, if you ask me. But I become what they considered a member of the church. and I get back into the cooking and the media teams at that time. And let's see, let me get my notes. Okay, so as I'm getting back into these like programs that I'm a part of, like running the sound stage, setting up the sound systems, the instruments every week, cooking food, I'm also joining more groups. And this is kind of where like in a cult situation, they try to isolate you as much as possible, and in they try to take every opportunity possible to teach you their lessons, their trying to think of a good way to put this, their doctrine. That's the word I'm looking for. They try to isolate you to teach their doctrine as much time as possible. So this is really where the roots start to form as to what you would normally consider a cult. So they start adding groups, and they call them life groups, right? And so I start going to more and more of them. And as I'm going to more and more of these over the following months, I'd say about the next 4 or 5 months, I'm going to about 3 or 4 of them a week. Not to mention, I was showing up at the church at 2 p.m. and would stay there till 10 p.m. on Sundays. So you could really consider this church to be a part-time job at this point. As I join more groups, and I notice the pastor is starting to take over more and more of those groups. So normally they would have their own teacher who would teach a certain lesson. But as I was more and more part of these, I realized that the pastor is taking over those lessons. And the people in charge of them were saying, oh yeah, I wanted him to take over because I'm not able to teach anymore, blah, blah, blah. But it just seemed coincidental. It seemed coincidental at the time, but obviously now, knowing what I know about the system and how it works, it's by far not coincidental that the main leader would take over groups like that. So he's taking over these groups. And at the time, just because of, probably partially because of the way that the church was running and my outside life at the time, this was probably my most depressed I've ever been on a consistent basis. So I was extremely depressed. I wasn't really like mentally able to think for myself at this point. And so I do what I consider, I started to plug into the church, where if you're in a community of people and you're around those people a lot, you can, it's almost like being a part of a USB hub. And whenever you need like a little bit of juice, or whenever you don't really want to think for yourself, essentially, you know, you just plug into the hub and you let the hive mind like speak for you. You know, you let those doctrines be your opinions. You let those people make your decisions almost. And so that's kind of what it was. You know, I'm just plugging into this collective thought process of the 50 or 60 people that are going there at this time. And, you know, I just made a note here that the church is requiring more time out of volunteers. I think by the time I left in 2017, they were requiring about 24 to 30 hours of me a week, from the groups to setting up to things like that.
Yeah,
it is a lot of time.
Job.
Yeah, it's a part-time job. Not to mention, I was working half an hour away from home. So a lot of times what it would be, I would drive to work at 6:30 in the morning, get there at 7, work till 4, and then I would be at the church doing something most of the time. Like either part of a group at somebody's house, working on something, because I was also in charge of, I wanted to like get us more active in the social media. So I was doing like marketing stuff. So I was doing like live streams. I made the hashtag that they still use to this day. So I was working on a lot of marketing stuff for them. So I was there 24, 30 hours a week.
So they still exist. Like this cult's still like
it's worse now. It's 100% worse now. Yeah, I'll get into that at the end, kind of what's changed since I left. So this is about a year after I rejoined. You know, I'm plugged into this hive mind, right? Like I'm not really thinking for myself. I'm depressed almost all the time. I really don't like process the way that I normally would. And so my friend that went with me the first day back, and his girlfriend are becoming more and more distant. And I know the reason now, and it's because they were getting attacked by the church because of her mom, who went there, was a very prominent figure, and she and him were like, you know, like having sex, doing what young couples do, and the church was berating them for it. Like they were taking them into meetings, they were calling her a slut, they were calling her like they didn't really love each other, all this kind of stuff, right? So I didn't realize that because I was plugged into the system, that's why they were becoming more distant to me, because they were distancing themselves from the church. And so I'm becoming irritated at them because I'm a part of the system that's calling them, horrific things and shaming them essentially. And so I'm getting irritated at them distancing themselves, which just, it's a feedback loop of making it worse and worse. And so I remember a very specific moment of, like, when I look back at it now, of the time that I realized that I was actually just plugged into this hive mind, is we were sitting in one of those groups and the pastor literally says, she dresses like a slut and she's such a devilish temptress or something along those lines. And I said, fuck yeah, she is, essentially said that, right? And I was like, yeah, she absolutely is like that. And it wasn't probably until like 3 or 4 weeks later that I had a really big fight with the both of them. And these are pretty good friends of mine, right? Like, they still are my friends to this day. I had a pretty big fight with them and I refused to talk to them. And I remember 2 weeks after they decided to just basically not come back. Like, they hadn't been back and we all knew that they weren't coming back. And I was walking past the pool tables in the church, setting stuff up. And I just had this thing that clicked in my head. And I realized this church has turned me away from my best friend of, I think, 7 years at the time. Has basically brainwashed me against my best friend. And I walked out and I never came back.
Wow.
This was setting up. I was in the middle of setting up. I think I was a part of the cooking team that day because they had since separated it into like 4 teams that cooked once a month. And I just walked away. I just kind of left.
Right.
I just realized that while there are good people that went there, and I mean, I am still friends with some of them to this day, ultimately they are manipulating me. And there's a lot of things that, like, just for the sake of simplicity, I've cut out. So there's like other stories where like evidences of the pastor starting to groom people for doing what he did to that girl before, he just kind of like pulling them into a counseling session. And there was a girl that I went back and forth with, which was a good reason why I stayed a lot of times. Because I did have a lot of doubts, especially during the second go through, but because I was so depressed and just plugged into the community, there was a lot of times that like a specific person would get me to stay. But like now,
to be clear, when you say grooming, you're talking about like how like a pedophile will groom like a kid to be like their sex object, kind of like preparing them and like training them.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay,
I would say that's the case. And
I just know not everyone knows that terminology, so I just wanted to throw that out there.
So grooming, as in like he would start taking them into more life groups that he's directly a part of. This church, so it's very strange. This church is very focused on Dungeons and Dragons, which I think is weird.
Like, that's that.
Yeah. So he's a big dungeon master. Yes.
Okay.
Wait, but wasn't it like back in like the 70s, like all the churches were afraid that was like turning the kids like okay.
Yes.
Okay.
That's really, honestly, that wasn't really relevant to a lot of churches, is what I found out. Because I also had that when I was a kid at different churches, like Dungeons and Dragons is evil and all this stuff. And another thing to keep in mind about this church is, so for most churches, the average age around here is about 35. So there's a lot of old people, there's a lot of really young kids. So it kind of averages out about there. This church's average age was 31. So, keep in mind that there were 2 people by the time I left that were over 40 going there. 2 people. So it was a very young people, and yes, they were very focused on Dungeons and Dragons, and I always wanted to be a part of that. I'm a huge nerd, love that sort of thing, but I was never, like, he only invites people that are part of his inner crowd to play with him, which I just think is bizarre. And so, yeah, there are evidences of grooming, at least someone who knows what it looks like to me. Maybe people in the church don't realize that. I'm sure they don't. But yeah, it's getting worse. They got their own building, so they don't have to. And so they said when I was there that once they had their own building, people wouldn't have to be there so often to like set up and stuff. People are living there now, like in the church, and there are people there that are still doing, the part-time job thing couple days, like 3, 4, 5 days a week, there's you know, somebody there doing something, working on something. You know, it's never an empty building, and they're always doing something specific for the church. And you know, it's just they eat a lot of people's time. There's an instance where my best friend's brother still go, so my siblings still go there. My brother and my sister still go there. And my best friend's siblings go there, or at least one of them does. So he was dropping him off, and the pastor actively told him that the next time he sees me, so the pastor is telling my best friend the next time he sees me that he should beat me up for him. And then, so the pastor won't interact with me at all, but he definitely wants to beat me up. And then this is my first time like really on a public forum talking about this, but I definitely have like brushed up against them since. There's a lot of times like on Facebook, I thought their shit was laughable, so I put the laughing emoji. You know how you can like reaction on people's posts?
Yeah.
And I had like 2 or 3 people message me within an hour asking me like, hey man, why are you putting laughing emojis on shit? And you know, the only reason they convinced me to talk it down is because it was somebody that I still respect quite a bit, who I think's just sipping on the crazy juice. You know, and I did step down, but now I'm the only person on their page. I can't leave a review. I can't react to their post. I can't comment. I can only share their stuff. So every so often I'll share it and say, look at this hog shit, basically.
Oh, Jesus.
I get a little petty with it because, you know, it does bother me that my siblings still go and that people that I know very well are, you know, in something that is manipulative. I said something to Don a little bit earlier. There's a study that they did, or somebody did, on like cults in general, and she came up with 8 steps of like how cults kind of bring you into the fold. Like, how does the brainwashing work? And the big one that really like affects me still is they do this thing called love bombing, which is basically they'll shower you in praise and bring you on board and show you everything that you know, everything you want to be and how this community is amazing. And then they bring on the tough love afterwards, right? And that's when they start bringing in the isolation and things like that. So
Right.
That's kind of it.
Yeah, I mean, well, first I want to thank you for, you know, opening up about that. And I had a, you know, someone in chat also was saying that they just find it, you know, really amazing that you're sharing this. And I think even though this isn't like you were saying at the beginning, and I'm going to have to like splice the VOD. So like on my stream, the first like 5 minutes, my audio was just muted. So I may have to get with you and like splice VODs or something. Yeah, but for anyone that was like stuck in mine, you know, even like Mopsky was saying earlier, even though this like isn't like a, you know, Charles Manson cult, I mean, it still obviously had an impact on you. And it's still fucked up. Either way, I mean,
the thing to keep in mind is it's not just me that's affected by these small-time manipulators that have a following. Like, I really doubt that this guy has the capability of killing multiple people and taking people down with him. I just don't think that he has that like manipulative personality. But he has manipulated a fair amount of people, you know, and there's something to be said about that. And so like one of the biggest resources for me, what I was getting out of it was the ex-Christians subreddit. And that really opened my eyes to, there are a lot of like these counterculture churches across America and the world, I'm sure, that are affected by these like small-time manipulators that preach a counterculture message, but really are just trying to get something that they want.
Are you still religious?
That's a good question.
I figure we're going there. I mean, that's, to me, that's like my first question in mind is like, did this like ruin religion for you? Or put a bad taste in your mouth?
It did. It ruined like what is considered Christianity for me. I would still consider myself vaguely a Christian, but at this point in my life, I'm not really ready to revisit the idea of religion. So, or at least Christianity, I suppose, because I've looked a bit into like Buddhism, and like Eastern religions, which I find more relate to me. So I'm getting more into those. I still consider myself vaguely a Christian. Um, I suppose I would consider myself a fundamentalist, which is a movement of Christians in the early 1900s that said that there's really only 10 things in the Bible that are relevant for people to believe. And I kind of consider myself to be one of those. But it's on a back burner for me. Religion in general is on such a back burner. There were a lot of things coming. So the backstory to this that's kind of relevant is I was raised in church my whole life, and I went to a ton of different churches. When I say that as a kid, I went to 15 different churches for longer than 6 months, that's probably a pretty accurate statement.
Wow.
It might be give or take a few there. So there were a lot of like doctrines that I picked up from going to each individual church that had basically, like when you take Play-Doh, right? And if you were to mash a bunch of colors together, like you took a handful of blue and and yellow and green and everything, and you mashed it all together, it would just end up brown. That's kind of the way that my spiritual take on everything was. And so even to this day, a lot of times in counseling, because I do see a therapist, it does come down to, okay, what church did I take this piece from, and why is this not how reality works? Like, okay, so like a really real example. When I first got out of the church, I didn't know what my take was on premarital sex. I didn't know what my take was on drinking, all this kind of stuff. So I didn't really know where I was going to go, because I got a girlfriend like 2 or 3 months afterwards, and she wanted to do things and I wasn't ready, and that just caused a rift in the whole thing. So it didn't really work out. But I was still processing those. Those were a really active thought for me. Another really real one is like, I didn't know how to talk to homosexuals. And I know that's a really weird way of putting them, but that's like my upbringing, right? Like anybody who was gay was kind of just a, you say you don't judge them, right? Like in the church, they say they don't judge them, but you also don't really conversate with them. And so you see them as something else. And so I had to really wrestle with that when I first left the church. There was a guy at one of my jobs that like, he had face tattoos to the point where his face was blue. And I was genuinely surprised that he could speak. It's stuff like that, where it's like you're so far removed, and especially like the cult made that so much worse. But to go back to the original question, am I religious? Yes, but it's such a back burner that I don't know when or if I will ever get back to it.
So I actually have a... Oh, go ahead. Sorry. No, go ahead, caller.
No, so it's just like a really small figment in the back of your head. It's there, but you're just not. It's just there, like you're not really thinking about it.
I mean, essentially, look at it like, okay, so if you're cooking, and you're making and you got to make like a sauce for the cooking, for the whatever you're making, and you got to make like, cook up some beef or something like that. You'd put the sauce on, and you'd put it on a back burner on low, and you just kind of you let it simmer and keep it warm. That's essentially what religion is for me. It's simmering, it's on low, it's not relevant because I'm cooking beef, I'm cooking, working on so many other things, right?
Right.
So I actually have a question in chat. So it looks like for a while there, you were kind of 1 foot in, 1 foot out. So like there must be like a lot of draw to this cult. What prevents you from going back?
That is a really good question. What prevents me from going back is probably the same thing that has led me to not going back to a lot of exes, is kind of like, you can't really say the things that you've said and just have me forget about those, or do the things that you've done, I suppose, in this case. I'm sure you guys have had the thought where like, oh man, I really do want to go back to this ex. It was really great with her. It's essentially the same thought with the cult every so often. And not so much anymore, but especially like the first year after I left. When times were really difficult, I was like, man, I really miss this community. And, that has made me think that way. But then, it's just one of those things where you have to keep teaching yourself, remember what they did. Remember what they did. And, I know a lot of times the saying is forgive and forget. I don't believe in the forget part. I think you can forgive people without forgetting what they've done to you. Does that answer that question?
I think so. If not, they'll let me know, I guess, here in a few moments in the chat.
It's also one of those things where like I do find myself getting far too involved in communities, and then I like pull out of them quickly. So like Color and Don, you're aware, like with the Horde, you know, Brutus Horde, it's a little difficult for me being a part of that because it's a very close knit community, and I have a hard time being a part of that because it does kind of remind me of those church communities from when I was a kid, you know, where everybody's very close, but something could be going on in the backside that you don't know about. Obviously, I don't think that's the case, but it is difficult.
To my knowledge, at least.
Right, exactly. Brutus siphoning off all the money. We knew it.
Well, and I can understand like so obviously I've never been in a cult, but I have been in a fraternity, and they're pretty goddamn close.
They're really
like if I'm being honest with you, they're pretty fucking close. And like the fraternity, so the college I went to, really small. Like when I was an active member in the fraternity, we only had like 10 brothers, so it's a really tight knit, same sort of thing. It's like an us against them mentality. You know, they isolate you during pledge process from like your community. I mean, it's very similar. It really is. So I can understand somewhat.
It's a lot. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with anything like the Masons or Mormons do.
My grandfather's a Mason, a really high up Mason, actually. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So you're somewhat familiar.
Somewhat. I'm not a Mason myself, but yeah.
It's not nearly to the level that the pledges take it, but it is that same level of us versus them. You know, you have these rituals that you must do every time to be a part of this group, you know, to show your level of dedication. It is that sort of idea.
But it sounds like with you and, you know, this group, it sounds like really you were just trying to find a place to belong, and they accepted you with that love bomb, and you just, you know what I mean? That's kind of, to me, sounds like, because you were also, I mean, yeah, to me it sounds like you were really trying to find a place to belong, a place to like call your own. And religion was already comfortable to you because you said you grew up and you were raised in the church or a church.
Absolutely. I call it sipping the crazy juice. Okay. So here's a really, like, a lot of my friends, I don't know what it is different about their psychology, but they were able to reason out of it way before I was, right? So they were like, I remember a time specifically where I was talking to them, and they were like, you know, we've been drinking since we were like 18, right? And I was like, why didn't you guys tell me? Like, it never even crossed my mind until I had finally left the church that was an option, like drinking underage. Like, it was just like, you just don't do that because it's against what God wants. So it's stuff like that. What was your original question? I'm sorry, I forgot.
I was just kind of like, I guess, paraphrasing. It sounded like a big draw for you was that community. I feel like was kind of where we started with that, but
yeah, I wanted to bring it back to the psychology of it. Yeah, I was drinking the crazy juice way before. You know, I had been a part of so many churches, and I was actively involved in these religions, right? Like in what this religion is. And so being a part of that community of people who were equally as involved in making something great within this commonality of the religion between each other. So I'd say even to this day, you know, I'm still somewhat looking for a community, and I found it in other places. Also, like, you do have to understand that, like, in situations like this, there is no sense of self. They sort of try to take that away from you. So finding that for yourself has been a struggle.
So it sounds like everyone wants to know, you said that you were still looking for a community and you found some. What community? What have you found?
I mean, I haven't found anything in the way of the same as like a church, right? So like I said, being a part of the Horde is a community. Iron Mountain is a community as well.
Shout out to Iron Mountain, yay!
But like communities like that with like people I enjoy being around is kind of what substituted that for me. I haven't really found anything that is that level of community. I'll be honest with you guys. I find, at least in my brain, being in a relationship and being a part of a community are very, very similar and kind of sit in the same place. So when I was dating a girl and like living with her, I felt like I had that community. And ever since then, I've kind of been, ever since we broke up, which was July of 2018, it's kind of been looking for that same thing again.
So from my understanding, your cult kind of surrounded that quote unquote pastor, right?
They still do. To this
They
day,
still do.
it's a lot of, yeah. So my parents go every so often because my siblings go.
Right.
And they, what my parents tell me, I can't talk to this guy. Like, I have such a hostile reaction to even seeing his face. Like,
Right.
I just know I'm not the person to go talk to him. So what my parents have told me is a lot of these sermons, they have like a specific place out of the section of the service, right? So usual church service goes anywhere between an hour to 2 hours if you're Catholic, 4. So between like an hour and 2 hours, they have a specific section where they talk about how great the pastor is, right? Like how much he's done for the church, how much he's dedicated. And to be fair, he's a hardworking person. But like I think it's very strange that somebody is supposed to be God's servant gets a specific portion out of the service for praise.
Right. So would you be comfortable telling us like a little bit about him?
Yeah, I mean, what do you want to know?
Like what kind of person that he was? Like how did he respond to you at times? What were what were his behaviors like? What were some of his habits? Things like that. How did he talk to you? How did he talk to other people and so forth?
Okay. If I said that he felt like a very charismatic boss, but only when he wanted to be, would that
Right.
kind of make sense? So, like, he was a very charismatic person. He knew how to talk to people. He knew how to read people really well. But he really only brought you in close when he felt like you were leaving.
Right.
So if you weren't a part of his inner circle of people that he's trying to get something out of those people, either that be dedication or loyalty or whatever, if you weren't a part of that inner group, he really wouldn't interact with you very much. You'd go up to talk to him because everybody liked this guy in the church. I remember when I was there, I'd have something funny I'd want to go tell him after service almost every time. And sometimes he had time for me, sometimes he didn't. Once you peel back the layers of the charisma and the hardworking and the being able to read people, and I mean he was a fairly convincing teacher. Once you peel back those layers, you realize that it's someone who isn't very confident in themselves, who's extremely narcissistic,
Yeah.
so doesn't have a very good opinion of himself, but everything revolves around him.
So in your opinion, was this really just a way to like boost his ego and feelings of self-worth? Because one of my questions I had was like, what's their end goal? Like, what do they, besides trolling for, ass, which it sounds like this is one way he gets that. What's the end goal for this dude? And this,
It's a lot of effort for some ass.
I mean, it is,
view
right?
I view him as very primal, which is a weird way to put it, but it's like I don't think he necessarily knows that he's manipulating a lot of people to get what he wants. It's just the way he does things.
Right.
I don't think he's doing it willingly is not the right word. I don't think he's doing it knowing. But that's just the way that it comes across because of the way that he is, right? He's self-focused and he doesn't have a very good opinion of himself. So even if one person leaves, that's an attack on his character personally.
Is he profiting from this?
So this is kind of just a speculation territory. I don't know this for sure, but he goes in and out of jobs, and I have to imagine that he's either using some sort of church resource that he's not supposed to, or is legitimately siphoning funds off of them. And he always came across as like, well, I can't be siphoning funds off the church because I drive this Kia, right? Like, it's not like I'm driving a sports car, but
Right.
he lives rather meagerly, so it would not surprise me that the donations of the week would be able to pay for him to just not have a job.
Right.
Huh.
I mean, who knows? He could be siphoning all that money into a bank account.
I have no idea.
in Europe somewhere.
I mean, I've been out of it for about 2.5 years now. I really couldn't.
Right.
This is like this church. I'll talk about the people who go there. With my siblings, I'll talk because some of the people are still my friends. Still talk to them on a somewhat consistent basis. But as far as the church goes, it's really off topic. It's off limits for a lot of people that I know who go there. They just
Right.
won't talk about it with me, which is perfectly fair, I guess. But yeah, it's off topic. So I don't. There's a lot of things I don't know what's going on. It's
Sure.
a lot of it's through the grapevine for me anymore.
Right.
Dude, what do your parents think of it? So I know you said you have siblings that still go. Your parents have gone occasionally. Did they have a similar perspective as you? As like this is like a manipulative cult, or do they view this more as like an extension of the church?
My parents have never liked the pastor. They thought he was bad news from the start. They, like I said, they go occasionally because my siblings go there. They went when I was there occasionally. But they never really liked the guy. I think my parents are reluctant to say the word cult. But I think that they have similar thinkings where like it does seem like he's the big kahuna and everybody just kind of follows him. So they're not fans.
Yeah. Does that piss you off any? That like a lot of your friends are still part of this? Does that like make you mad?
Yes and no. I don't want anybody to be manipulated,
Right.
but also at a certain point, it really came down to it, and I was like, I don't know. They're at this point they're kind of choosing it, right? Like
Right.
they're choosing to continue to go there even when, and there's a couple of them that I'm like, you do realize this is off, and they said, oh yeah, that's definitely off, but then they don't leave, right? So there was also another situation that kind of links to the church where like when I was still actively going, I had some very close friends when I was there. And like when I say close friends, we were doing things together like 3-4 times a week. And they
Right.
were getting married, and I just assumed that I'd be a part of their wedding, which for me is a big deal. Like I want to be trusted in that way. And I wasn't even considered because well, I don't know if it's because of my status with the church, because I was at this point I was kind of in and out. Like I really wasn't like committed fully. I was really confused about what was going on. But they picked somebody who was higher up in the church. So I just don't think that's coincidence. And it's not even that they didn't have me be a part of the main ceremony. They didn't have me do anything. It's like they didn't trust me at all. And so those friends, right? Like I thought if I'm going to leave, those people are going to be there for me. And the only reason I talked to any of them is because I happened to be with one of them.
Right. Has this pastor ever made any of your friends like do anything they didn't want to do, or manipulate them into doing something that they didn't want to do?
Not to my knowledge. I think it's mostly still at the suggestion stage of grooming, where it's like
Right.
you trust that person enough that if he suggests you do something, then you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense, or like that's a good idea, or I'm interested in that, or something like that. To be honest with you, I don't know if he's smart enough to get past that stage. I haven't seen any evidence that that's the case, so I don't know if he ever will. But it may have happened, and I just don't know about it.
Yeah. I don't know, dude. That would piss me off.
It does make me mad. It does, because like my sister's a part of that D&D group, right? So it
Right.
scares me a little. Like,
Yeah.
what does that mean?
Right.
Oh shit, yeah, I get that.
Yeah, that would piss me the fuck off. I mean, if my siblings or any of my family members or close friends were a part of something that, that I knew they were being manipulated, or trying to be groomed into doing something, or trying to be someone that the quote unquote pastor wants them to be, I mean, that would piss me off royally.
It's definitely not a fun feeling. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So I got a viewer question. What's your take on Scientology?
So I'm more versed with Mormonism, which is very similar. It is a cult, but it's interesting in the aspect that it's not necessarily a religious cult. It's more so. I don't know how much you guys know about like Jonestown specifically, but that also was only a surface religious cult. It was actually more about once you got like deeper into the religion, it was more about like socialism and like people who wanted to be a part of a purely socialistic society. I view Scientology kind of in that same way, where it's more of a like they might say that they believe in reincarnation, or they say they believe in God or whatever, but I think that's more of a tactic just to get people inside. I think ultimately once you get inside, it's more of a reform sort of thing, where it's like, oh, we want to live in either a socialistic or a fascist, or I don't know about the inner workings of it, but I think it's quite similar to that sort of idea.
It is pay to win. That's funny. That's a funny comment.
Yeah, that's fair. But actually,
those
a lot
damn
of
loot
cults are like
boxes
that.
are broken.
That I do a lot of research into cults. Now it's a very interesting topic to me. It's also something that like eventually I want to take a little bit more seriously, is giving people resources for getting out of religions that they were either born into or don't want to be a part of, or something like that. It's something that's very interesting to me.
So, and I don't mean to step on anyone's toes, but what's an interesting thing with me is that like, who determines what is a cult, what's not a cult? I mean, because like throughout history, a lot of major religions were considered cults. Like Christianity back in the day was considered a cult.
Yeah. Yep.
In itself.
I mean, it essentially was a count. If you look back at 1495, when the original Martin Luther was posting up the 95 Thesis on the Catholic Church door, that was essentially a counterculture and considered a cult for a very long time.
Even prior to that, like Roman Empire, I mean, you're a Christian, you'd get, crucified.
Right.
Because it was a cult, right? I mean,
right. Up until about, I think, 348 AD is when that really changed for the Romans. So it's as far as what I understand and how I kind of define a cult, because you're right. When I looked up, before we got on today, I was looking up the definition of a cult to kind of explain that a little better. And there really isn't like a good explanation on it. I would understand a cult to be is any time that the leader is less about preaching the religion and more about manipulation of the people in the religion. So I think it's okay to speak a counterculture. I don't like any church at this point. I think they're all fake. I think pretty much all of them. I'm sure there's some out there that are pretty genuine, but I've yet to find them. The church system in general, I think, is very flawed, but I wouldn't necessarily consider them a cult, because I think at the end of the day, the leaders in charge aren't necessarily trying to manipulate the people under them. I think they genuinely believe it as well.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm really trying hard not to get my own things, because I was going to say, like, I mean, it's, I don't know. I could definitely see though how like you could have like a bad taste in your mouth about organized religion also.
That was something I was gonna say earlier, is like, do take what I say with a grain of salt, because I have been burnt out on this by the first 20 years of my life.
Oh no, I mean, what I was gonna say is I feel like really there's the difference between like Catholicism and your cult is that you were a part of is that Catholicism has millions and millions of members and your cult did not. You know what I mean? Like
I would agree with you.
They're getting filthy rich off this. They're also grooming kids. I mean, it's anyway, but like I'm trying not to like get my own like beliefs on things.
I don't. I really ultimately at the end of the day I don't. I'm just saying that I do believe there are people out there who are running churches and probably churches of decent size who are genuinely a part of the community. Whether or not they're doing good things for the people that they're supposedly over, I can't necessarily say to that, but like they are at least sipping the same crazy juice that the rest of them are.
Yeah. And I mean, I've always okay, so like when I was younger, I definitely was a lot more of like that like antagonistic atheist. I was like, you're fucking stupid. Now that I'm like a grown adult, I don't do that anymore. You know, as a grown adult, but I do think organized religion in general is pretty problematic. And I think the extreme end is what you've described today. It may have been in like a micro level, you know, but give it another 30, 40 years. I mean, who knows, the cult of the Revenant or whatever you said they were called. You know, I mean, yeah. Christianity probably started out really small too. I mean,
I'm very curious to hear your take on religion, Don. Like I'm itching to hear it now.
So I think it's normal. Okay, so like in my own opinion, and I'm not saying my own opinion like I made this up. I'm sure there's philosophers who've said this before, but I think people have always, life sucks, right? Think like thousands of years ago, like at the birth of Christianity, quality of life was pretty shitty. You lived, you die, you get sick, you're fucked. A belief in something more, something greater, something like better probably helped you get through life. You know, it's also a way, I mean, like a lot of our values and like laws, you could say, are even drawn from some religion. I believe there's like a natural law though. Like if you take a baby who doesn't know anything of the Bible and you kill their parents, they're gonna be like, wow, that's fucked up. That's wrong. Not a baby, but you get my point, right? Like I think there's like a natural law. But I do think that religion served a valuable purpose in life. I mean, I really do. I think it helped people get through tough times. You know, it gave you something to believe in that was more than like, well, I'm going to die when I'm 25 or, you know, if I make it that far and hopefully this fucking, you know, bubonic plague's not going to wipe me out. That sort of thing. I mean, that's kind of... My wife is going up in arms. Yeah, so not that she's religious, but I mentioned philosophers and stuff. But yeah, so like that's kind of my take on it. Is I feel like it's outdated at this point. I feel like religion has killed more people in the world than Stalin and Hitler combined. Yeah. I genuinely think it's one of the like a modern plague. I mean, you know, like a psychological plague at this point. I do think there's some benefits to religion. Studies have shown that, like, for instance, people who are ill, who are prayed for, have better recovery odds. Now, I'm not saying that it's God that came down and healed them, but there's something about that belief and, like, something's going to take care of me. There's some, you know what I mean? Like, so, like, there's some benefits for religion.
It's almost a placebo effect, you know?
It is,
knowing that you have a community, your well-being, that's very powerful.
Yeah,
it is, absolutely. I mean, so like I if you haven't figured it out by now, I'm an atheist. I didn't grow up in a church. Like I went to church till I was like 6 until my parents got divorced, and then they were like, "All right, fuck this," and then we never went back.
Right.
So yeah, I haven't really. I mean, I've also always been one to question in general. You know, I believe Moses was schizophrenic.
That's probably a conversation for another day, but I think there's a lot of things in the Bible that are easily explained by like modern science. Like how many times in like Bible and old manuscripts and things, like things were explained as magic or somebody as a witch or a devil or something like that, that's explained by some sort of modern mental disorder or some sort of modern ailment or things like that. But that's probably a topic for another day.
I mean, I can tell you, like, you know, I would not be shocked if I get a client one day that had things talking to them.
Nothing about Christianity or Catholicism, because my parents are devout Buddhists, and it made them better people because of it, and I think that's great. I mean,
That's
that's kind of my stance on religion. You know, it's like if it helps you become a better person, I mean, then do it to it, but don't push that shit on me. You know,
I have
That's
looked
how I am.
more into, and I wouldn't necessarily say Buddhism directly, but like more of an Eastern way of thinking, spiritually, and that's resonated a lot more with me. And this is more recent. So I've been like involving myself in meditation, and the idea of like centering yourself and bringing yourself into the present, and clearing your mind and things like that. And I find that it resonates more with me, but like for me, it's almost the exact opposite, where religion made me a worse person, so I needed to pull out of
Right.
it to become a better person.
Right.
I mean, I think,
Whatever.
and I think religion has the capability of doing that really easily. I mean, because there's not much wiggle room of, well, if you don't believe this, you can be right. I mean, nowadays it's a lot more like understanding, but like typically, if you don't believe what we believe, you're fucking wrong, and you're going to hell, or you're a heathen,
Yeah.
or
Or you're even excommunicated by your community, which is
Excommunicado.
you don't think it's a big deal, but when you're a Mormon that moved to Utah and you suddenly don't agree with the way that the Mormon church is changing, but everyone around you is a Mormon and you don't have anywhere to go, being excommunicated was a death sentence in some cases.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, back in the day, like 1400s, being excommunicated by the Catholic Church was like, yeah, you're fucked. I mean,
Right, exactly.
you fucked. But even if you look throughout history, I mean, again, I'm not trying to just rag on this, but like, how many people have been killed in the name of religion between wars,
Yeah.
terrorism of all different sorts? Not just saying, the current status, but like, yeah.
What do you mean that the entire Catholic Church decided to commit a basically genocidal terrorism on the Middle East in the 1200s?
Mm-hmm.
It
Twice.
was called the Crusades, everybody.
Twice, right? That there was like 2 crusades.
Yeah, twice. Yep, there were 2 crusades.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, it's
but even more up to like like even past the crusades, like a lot, I don't think people realize, like a lot of wars are like, look at Ireland, you have Catholic Protestant. I mean, there's lots of like, yeah, there's lots
and
of
that's really you think that's distant, but that's really modern by most standards. That's less than 100 years ago.
yeah. No, I mean, yeah, it can be fucked. But I do think it's funny, and hopefully no one got offended when I said, Moses was schizophrenic. But like, I've had clients that have had shit talk to them. I don't go around and be like, oh my god, it's this person's speaking to God. No, they're mentally ill and they need help.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Nowadays, if you go up to anyone and be like, dude, this Bush was talking to me, man, I swear, they'll be like, okay, buddy, I need to make a quick phone call. Stay calm. It's all right. We're gonna help you.
I think there is also something to be said, kind of as a devil's advocate to that especially in the last 100 years, there's a lot of people who use religion as a tool, and it's very obvious. So like presidents have done this, politicians have done this, leaders do this all the time, where they use Bible verses to prove a point, but then never speak of it again, and then do heinous things, right? Like that's happened a lot of times. So I think it's something to be said that like a lot of the examples that we have in the modern era for religion are not necessarily the best examples. Not necessarily that I disagree, by the way. I don't. I'm there with you, but
Yeah.
So then Phasia brought up a good question. Buddhism is about the practice and not the religion, though, right? So from my understanding, so I used to go to the temple every so often, and this was when I was a lot younger, and I was to live with my parents. So they would drag me along to the temple with them. And from my understanding about Buddhism, yeah, it is really about the practice. Buddhism seems to me, from my understanding, is very self-contained. It's really about you as a person rather than what's going on around you. So you kind of focus on you. It teaches you to be more open-minded, less judgmental, don't hate, always love, appreciate everything around you. You know, it is very Zen. It is Buddhism. So, but yeah, from my understanding, that's you're absolutely right. It is very yeah, reincarnation, karma. They believe in that stuff, and yeah, I mean that's from my understanding. I mean, I didn't delve too deep into it.
And what's kind of funny, and again, I really feel like this talk is turning very much just into like religion bad, but like,
Yeah.
but like, there's even like accounts of like Buddhist terrorists and and Buddhist violence. So like, really, it's almost like a strong belief in anything in the hands of the wrong person can lead to bad things. And that's kind of, I guess, more so, I guess the point we should probably be making more so, instead of just bashing people for having strong beliefs and faith in things. It's, you know,
yeah, I think that's really the case, you know, with humans in general. When somebody's passionate about something and somebody else is passionate about the opposite thing, it tends to clash.
Yeah.
So anyone have any other questions? I mean, we can keep going. I feel like we could probably go all night, but I know we've taken some questions from some people, but
yeah, if anybody has any more questions, I'm a completely open book about this thing. So if you guys want to hit me up with it, I know a lot of the people in chat know who I am. So if you guys have any more questions that you want to ask me personally, I can definitely do that as well. Like I want to do a more like deep dive into like the side stories and stuff at some point as well. So
I want to see this guy's face.
Whose face?
This pastor's face.
Oh, the pastor.
I actually probably could send you a picture over Discord. Hold on.
I bet he looks like a. I'm not gonna do like. I'm not gonna do screen capture.
Can I show it?
I mean,
I would not.
I feel like that's getting towards like the swatting territory almost. Like it's getting like.
You're right.
But I do kind of want to see the twerp's face. But yeah, no, I won't do display capture or anything like that. I mean,
I'll take a look at it. Maybe we could just post it in Discord or something.
I don't think. Maybe I don't have access to it anymore. Hold on. He may have blocked me.
So, chat, when you ask what the future holds, are you asking like for this cult, for Mopsky, for this podcast in general, in life? Yeah, what do you... Be a little bit more specific. I get you want to know what the future holds, but I can't predict the future, so I need a little bit more of a specific.
Yes, you can. That's bullshit.
Hey Don, I'm gonna send it to you on Facebook.
That's fine.
I don't know if you have color proof on there.
I can just show him tomorrow.
To him. Yeah. I'm gonna send it to you on Facebook.
Unless he has to know right now.
I kind of want to know right now, but it can wait until tomorrow. It's okay.
I could text it to you. Technology is impressive. I could do
if
that.
It'll let me send the link, I can get it to you on Discord. I don't know if it'll let me copy the. Because I have, like I said, I have only certain things that I can do on their page.
Sure.
Okay, I think it worked. So here you go.
Okay, let me check this.
And he's the one on the left, I believe. Yes. Yep.
So, Zero, I'm going to have to warn you, my VOD is fucked the first, 7 minutes, but you can get the hang of it.
Oh, so it's the Guido-looking guy on the left?
Yeah, the guy on the left, he's, yeah.
Okay.
I think that's right.
Or in the gray and black shirt?
All right, guys, I'm checking this shiz out.
I believe so.
I have it on mute, but I'm just
right.
Looking at this guy's.
Yeah, I don't want to get brain cancer, so I'm probably not going to listen to this.
Yes, the gray and black. Yep.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, that guy looks like a douche.
It's kind of like, in a way, it's a little scary in a way because, I mean, to me, he just looks like a normal dude.
Yeah. 100%. Well,
but you never know. You know what I mean? You look at this guy, it's like, oh, he's that,
right.
But he's like manipulating people.
It's the same with my grandpa, which is a story for another time. But normal dude that's done bad things. I think what Jeremy's asking in chat is like, what's my specific future? Is that what he's talking about?
Dude, yeah, I'm.
I think he's talking about yours. What he said, what's his future?
So, at least for me, like I said, I'm seeing a therapist, and a lot of
Nope, that's not. He doesn't care about your future. That's not what
I'd
he
say
wants to know.
like the cult is like church in general is probably something that comes up the most, followed very closely behind by relationships. So I'm in therapy. I'm working through it. Um, a lot of times, so like working through it. I have, like I said, I have trouble working with like communities and things. It's very difficult for me to get a part of them. So I kind of just work on myself. So I'm going back to school and things like that. Like I'm just focusing on the things that were put down about me. I just don't want to ever be a problem again. Like the things the church said weren't relevant about me, I want to not be problems. So that's why I see therapy. That's why that's why I go to therapy. That's why I'm going back to school. I just want to make sure that like I know that I am useful, I suppose.
Yeah. I mean, those are all good things. You focus on you, you know?
Yeah, exactly. No, it is an internal focus. It's like I said, I was a part of a church for 20 years for my whole life. I've literally had my opinions spoon-fed to me for a very long time. So creating my own opinions about things is very hard. And like this is gonna be a weird way to describe it, but church and communities are kind of like crack. For me, it's it's the same as somebody going back to an old addiction. It's, oh, thank God I don't have to think for myself anymore.
Right. But I mean, I think of it this way. You've been kind of manipulated into one direction. Well, I don't know if I want to use the term manipulated. I'm not sure if you truly were. I mean, only you would know that. But you can always turn yourself into a different direction. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
So I think you're
I'd
on the right
say-
track. I think you're on the right track. Focus on you.
Right. Yeah, I think I'm in a good way now. It took a very long time. Because afterwards, I mean, after the whole thing went down, I got into 2 relationships shortly after one another, and so I didn't really like. I don't think I really got to process it till after those were over. And kind of like realized that in the last year's time, I had decided to leave something that was a part of my life in 20 years, and also dated 2 different girls that I was pretty invested in. So
Right.
didn't really do the best for myself in those cases.
At the same time?
No. They were like right after the other.
Yeah, and I think you talked about that when you were telling us the story. It's busting your chops.
Man, what was the joke somebody pulled off? Like, man, managing one girl's hard enough. How do you think people like pull off 2?
Oh man. Oh jeez.
Hey.
Yeah.
Any
Yeah, I mean-
other? Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh no, it's good. I mean, you got friends here, dude. You know, I mean, you got friends who play Siege with you. You got friends who play video games with you. I mean, you have support here. You know, so
Yeah, and I mean
Just put that out
that is where my support is like I find more in common with people online right now more than I do like a lot of my because like I mean to take something a little more personal is like a lot of my friends right now aren't very driven people. And
Right.
so it's difficult to be relating to them because it's like I'm an extremely driven person. I stream 3 times a week. I put out YouTube videos. I run a couple podcasts. I have a billion ideas of things that I want to do. And when your friends work at a factory 40 hours a week and that's pretty much what they'll be doing for the next 35 years of their life,
right.
it's a little difficult to be motivated. So yeah, that I find that the people online that I interact with, so they're just on this kind of that same wavelength, more or less.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions?
Yeah. give it another minute or two for questions, and then if there's nothing else, we'll probably wrap up.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, and I definitely think it's natural, going back to what you were saying about, and I think that's part of growing up. And I mean, so like, I know Color and I think he's in chat and can see your all's responses, by the way.
Yeah,
But,
yeah, I can.
oh no, I was talking about, I think Mopsky's in chat also, right?
Yeah, I'm in your chat.
Yeah.
Don.
So yeah,
I think I
like
have those as well.
yeah, so I mean, I think, and I know Color and I both have some like years on you age-wise, but I think it's, and I think I've said this to you before, but it's definitely like a natural progression as you get older that a lot of the people you used to like be friends with, not so much relatable as you get older. I mean, I think I have like one friend from high school still, and that's not a bad thing. Like, it's by choice, you know. But
I think it
Right,
has something
right,
to do with
exactly.
self-realization, you know?
Yeah, and I mean, it's the same reason why you might be married to somebody for 25 years and then realize it's not worth it then. You know, at a certain point, people grow, and people, especially people who are focused on growing, like myself, and I think you guys are as well. You know, when you're focused on growing and becoming a better person, sometimes you grow apart from the people that were a part of your life for that portion, right? Like, they helped you through one specific area in your life, and sometimes they're perennial, where they stay with you for a very long time, and sometimes they get you through a very specific section.
Yeah.
yeah, and that's true. 25, you're still developing and figuring out who you are.
I was
pre-
just
you're
talking
pre-
to my sister about that.
Yeah, I mean, your prefrontal cortex isn't really developed till you're like in your mid-20s.
Right.
So your personality is still being shaped and developed and
Right.
whatnot.
You know, and that's just a testament to, you know, anybody who's thinking about challenging what they've always thought, do it while you're young, because if you don't do it, or like, okay, so if you look into a lot of these cults, right, there's a lot of kids who are involved in these cults, and they didn't leave until they were in their, you know, late 20s, early 30s, when the cult fell apart, and they don't really know where to go, because that was their whole life, and their entire development was built by this cult. A really great one to listen to was, what is that podcast called? I'm gonna look it up, because it's really powerful. But it talks about, it's this kid's encounter with a cult growing up in it, and how it affected him personally, and how he had a very, like, he ends the podcast of 10 episodes, and he ends it with his personal story of, I had a very hard time adapting to real life afterwards.
Right.
I mean, I'm sure there's probably a level of like institutionalization like you would have from someone who's been like in prison for years and years, or like, you know, a psych hospital years and years. I mean, I imagine old habits die hard. That indoctrination probably is hard to get rid of. I mean,
Absolutely.
yeah. Well, this has been interesting and a bummer,
Yeah.
but very interesting.
Yeah,
I've enjoyed it. I really have, actually. It's been good. And I can see chat has too. I mean,
yeah.
from those of you who've been vocal, at least, have really engaged. Last call for any questions?
Yeah, like I said, if anybody has any like follow-up questions, anything that you're curious about, just let me know. Like, I'm pretty much about this sort of thing. Like I said, I want to help people who might be going through the same thing that I did. It's something I'm really passionate about, so I'd really like to help people.
And those of you joining late, our guest is Mopsky. We stream Siege, play Siege together. He streams other games also. We actually have a Siege podcast we do as well. You can find him on Twitter at Mopsky. Yeah.
I think it's at the real Mopsky.
Okay, well, we want to make sure you don't get to the fake Mopsky, so it's at the real Mopsky. Yeah, this has been good. I definitely have enjoyed this.
Yeah, most definitely.
Yeah,
Go follow all
it's
of
been
them.
a great conversation.
If you're in my chat, go follow Don Tony _Lamb. And go follow. What's your Twitch? Mopski?
Mine, it's just Mopski. Yep.
It's just Mopski. Moppski. Yeah. Go follow
Yep.
Mopski too. For some quality Siege content. I know those guys play together a lot, and I'm trying to get into the group too.
You're gonna get it, man. Like, it sucked that like last night, the one game that we played, we got paired up with like 3 douchebags who were being toxic as hell and griefing.
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine.
It's
I
how-
mean,
it's
I'm
how-
pretty sure
yeah.
after I start playing with you guys more often, I'll start to really get into the game more. So I'm
Just
I'm
wait.
trying to
Just
get-
wait till you give in to the meme. That's all it takes.
We ended up winning, honestly. Like, it actually worked
Yeah,
out
we
pretty
won.
well. Yeah, we ended up winning. But yeah, same with my chat, Colorproof. He spells it like he is not American.
Yeah,
For
because the regular color proof is taken, so I use the,
I've always
British
wondered.
way.
I've honestly always wondered why you why you spelled it that way. But I just thought that you wanted to seem fancy
Yeah.
or something. I don't know.
My friend actually came up with a name for me, but God rest her soul. I guess I shouldn't say that.
Is she
listen-
dead?
Yeah, she is.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Damn. Now I feel like a dick because I.
no,
that's
not
like
at all.
what-
Not at all.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well-
she was one of the reasons why I got into this field and why I wanted to stay
Oh.
in this field. So
That's
yeah.
what's up.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's at color spelled British like
COLOUR.
underscore proof. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, that turned dark very quickly. I did not mean for it to be that way, but yeah, that's the origin of my name. So
Well, there's nothing too dark for this conversation as we've seen
That's-
today. So
true that.
life is pain, and we will talk about it.
Yeah.
What is it they say in Letterkenny? What do the skids say? I hate my parents, I hate the world, and I hate myself.
Sounds about right. Sounds about right. All right, everyone. Well, so we'll do this again next week. I'm not sure yet what the topic is, but if anyone has any suggestions, you can DM me. My DMs are open. No dick pics, please. But you can
Send them all the dicks.
no dicks, please.
all
Please
the
no.
big veiny cocks.
I
Do
can't-
it.
I can't.
A plate of dicks.
I can't take it,
Yeah.
everyone. I can't
Bags
take
of
it.
'em.
I can't. But if you have any suggestions, you can DM any of us and our Colorproof for myself, and we will see you all next week, same time. And the VOD will be going up. I mean, I'm sure like on our Twitch, obviously. I'm gonna post it on YouTube, but if you want the full with the first like 10 minutes, you're gonna want to check out Colorproofs. So follow him on Twitch, and his VOD will be up.
Yeah. Yeah. My VOD will be up immediately after this, I think.
Yeah, same. I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
And then I'll post it on YouTube tomorrow night. Yeah. And thanks to everyone for coming out and engaging in the chat. It's been a good discussion today. And thanks
Yeah, it
for our
was.
guest Mopski for coming here and being the open book that you are. It's been good.
Yeah.
Yeah, excellent conversation, guys. It was good talking to all of you.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing. Appreciate it.
Oh yeah, no problem.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. I am going to bed for I have work tomorrow.
All right.
As am I.
All right. Thanks,
am I.
everyone.
All right, guys.
All right.
Catch
See
y'all
you
later.
guys. Bye.
Peace.